What's up, everybody? Welcome to The Conversation, a Crosspoint City young adults podcast created to help young adults have conversations about Jesus and what it looks like to follow him.
What's up, y'all?
Hey.
What's up?
How's it going? So we got a new thing going on today. We got 3 people instead of 2 on The Conversation, our young adult podcast. Are y'all excited?
Yeah.
We got
You
this
are?
nice
This is a big deal.
table. It's crazy.
Are you happy about the table?
It's a nice table.
She keeps asking where you got the
Yeah,
table
I'm
from.
gonna give me
I
this
got
table.
it from Amazon. Relax.
Christmas gift. We're getting her a table.
No, I'm not getting her a table. You can get her a table. She
Ansley's
doesn't
a
need a
good friend.
table.
She really likes this one.
Well,
Ansley's a true friend.
Ansley's not getting you a table. She's just telling you what you want to hear. All right, y'all. So I'm super excited about this because I feel like we can actually have a genuine conversation with 3 people better than 2. So this is why we've made the switch to having 2 people on the podcast, and I'm excited because it's you 2, and you guys are the goofiest.
You got that
I
right.
know.
Tweedledee and
Okay.
Tweedledum. That's what we
Who's
are.
dumb?
We'll play rock,
I
paper,
do
scissors.
trip up the stairs now.
But I think it's going to be good. We're going to be talking about a lot of good things on the podcast. I hope that this conversation encourages you, not just this one, but the ones that we're going to have in the future. And today we're going to talk about our story and why it's important to share our story. And so you guys got to share your story on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I don't think we've aired it, but it was kind of cool that you got to share your story on that kind of a scale.
Yeah.
And so my first question to you guys is, why do you think it's important to know your story and to also share it? What do you think?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. I wrote 3 reasons, but just to talk about the first one, to give God glory for something that you did not do and you could not have done without his power. It's important to know your testimony just to remember his faithfulness and to put his glory on display.
What do you
Yeah.
think, Darian?
Yeah, I agree with what you said about putting God on display. I also think it's important to know your story so you can reflect on it.
Yeah.
I think there are seasons, I can even think in my own life where I'll be going through a tough season. I'm, trying to hear the Lord's voice and trying to press on and endure in faith. And what helps continue to push me on is looking back and reflecting on the ways he has provided and
Yeah.
did come through and pursue me.
That's
So
good.
I think it's also just to equip us and encourage ourselves too.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just easier to share your story than other people's story. You
Yeah.
know, like knowing your testimony. You personally walked through some things with God, so you taking that time to know your story and also sharing it can actually connect with somebody. Because
Yeah.
think about it. I know I get to teach on Sundays sometimes, and I teach at young adults, but my story won't connect with everybody. My story won't connect with all the girls all the time, right?
Yeah.
Some girls will connect with, some it won't. But
Yeah.
you guys can really specifically talk to some people because you'll connect, even if it's just like, hey, your story connects more with a girl
Right.
than a guy, right?
Yeah.
And then vice versa. Sometimes my story connects more with a girl than it does with a guy. But our stories allow us to show people we're like on the same ground.
Yeah.
You know, some people see us and we work at church and they're like, you guys are just amazing. And you guys didn't go through what I've been through, but we actually have. Like all of our
Right.
stories have some rough patches, right? And I think I was actually thinking about your story, Ansley, because you said you didn't have the big mistakes, right? And your story was really simple. That reminds me of Kara's story. Kara always followed Jesus. Like when she was really little, she surrendered her life, and she calls her testimony boring. But to be honest, I'd rather have a boring testimony than an exciting one.
Yeah.
Like if I could look back, I wish I wouldn't have made all the choices that I made. But I know God redeemed my past and all this stuff. But just thinking, there are some people who would resonate with a person like you,
Yeah.
you know? So can you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I'm thinking right now, the Great Commission is a collective effort.
Ooh,
it's
that's
not
good.
just for pastors or paid professionals. It's for all of us because, like you said, your testimony might speak into someone else's life differently. So I love that.
Yeah.
So you want me to share a little bit of my story?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just so we
Yeah.
can see, I think, if we could see how different our stories are, same God, different stories, I think it'd be kind of cool. The fact that, and on top of that, we're all kind of from different places. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. My family's from Dominican Republic.
Wow.
You are a country girl.
Rome, Georgia.
And Darian, we're still trying to figure out where she's from, you know? But where are you from? Where were you
Don't
born?
disrespect Virginia Beach.
Virginia
Beach. So,
Okay.
but it's kind of cool that like we're all from different places.
Yeah.
And just think about this: we're all from different places, and we're all working together now. And the only reason we're together is because of Jesus.
Our commonality
You know?
is Jesus.
Ain't that crazy?
That's
That the
so
gospel
good.
changed
Yeah.
our life. And who would have thought? If you would have told me I was going to be on a podcast with two other girls, one country girl, one Virginia Beach girl, and we were going to do this for our young adult community, I'd be like, nah, that's not going to happen. But here we are.
Yeah.
And it's all because of Jesus. So I think it'd be cool just to share what God is working or doing in and through us and from different places all over the world.
Yeah.
In the U.S., I mean, so.
That's good. Okay, I'll share my story a little bit. So, I was raised in a Christian home. I have incredible parents. And so they just raised me in a godly home. I know that's not everybody's story, so I try not to take that for granted. But what was beautiful about my parents is they didn't just talk the talk and go to church on Sundays, but I watched them walk the walk all throughout the week. It was a Monday through just the entire week. They were showing me what it looks like to follow Jesus. And so around 6 or 7 years old, I made the decision to ask Jesus to be the Lord over my life. And I know it sounds crazy to people, but my life really changed as a 6-year-old little girl. I mean, I remember playing on the playground and pushing Jesus on the swings and telling my
Pushing
friends.
Jesus on the swing.
I
like your
literally have a
imaginary
memory
friend
of
on the
well,
swing.
yes, like he came to live in my heart. He was the Lord of my life, and so I would pray to him and tell my friends about him. Is that so weird? I was a little girl.
I'm not saying it's weird, but
Hey, Jesus loves the little children, okay?
He did.
I'm not saying he doesn't love the little children. I'm just saying this girl is saying I'm pushing Jesus on the swing.
Isn't it crazy?
Hey,
Let her
have her
that's
moment
cool,
with
man.
Good thing I didn't do it last week. It's good I did it when I was 6.
Yeah, if you'd be doing it now, we might need to talk to you.
But I really did have faith that he was, I was in a relationship with him, and he was my father who loved me. So, yeah, everything changed for me as a little girl. But as time went on, I started to stray. And so in middle school, I cared far more about fitting in than focusing on my relationship with the Lord, as I did when I was 6, pushing him on the swings. You're making me laugh about that.
No, I'm just saying that's
It's
pretty
one of those
cool.
things
It's
you
pretty
don't
cool.
realize how weird it is until you say it out loud, and you're like, I did that. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
It's a little weird. It's okay. It's okay.
So,
You and Jesus.
So I went to summer beach camp, and when I was 13 years old, and heard a message that absolutely changed my life. I remember the man was speaking to, are you a fan of Jesus or are you a follower of Jesus? So the example he used is, are you a fan on the sidelines who has the Jesus t-shirt and is, chanting the chants, knows all the right verses? Or are you a follower of Jesus who is in the game daily, actively pursuing him and following him? That changed everything for me. I knew in that moment, I want to be a follower of Jesus. An example I like to give people today is, we can follow people on Instagram and know everything about them, but not have a close, intimate relationship with them. And so that's the difference. So I knew that I wanted a close relationship with him. So I came home from camp and chased after Jesus with everything that I had. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. Darian, I'm assuming that's not our story.
No, not at all.
But it's just the truth. Like that's just not our story. I come from a single parent household.
Yeah.
So I didn't have both parents in the house. And I know that for me, my mom, she did try her best. I mean, she took us to church, did a whole bunch of stuff with us, but I didn't always see it modeled, because she was at work. So, but it's cool. It's actually encouraging that there are some really good parents out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like it kind of encourages me that this is possible. Even
Yeah.
for us, like we didn't come from the best household, and my mom was amazing.
Yeah.
But not having a dad most of my life, that was tough. And so I think just seeing that modeled gives us hope. At least me, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Coming from a broken household, sometimes you can have moments like, man, is it even possible to have like a godly, Christ-centered family? And so it's really encouraging when you hear stories like your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, they discipled me, and because of my dad's love for me. Now, they didn't always get it perfect, but it helped me view the Father, my Father in heaven's love for me, because I saw it displayed through my dad.
Yeah, no, that's so good, man. That's why I love hearing stories that are kind of, and I don't want to say boring, because anything with Jesus is never boring.
Yeah.
But I want to say simple. Like, that's just a simple testimony. Like, God gripped your heart really, really young, and you followed him, and you obviously you made some mistakes. You weren't perfect. You sinned, whatever. But your choices didn't lead you down like this crazy path, like some of us do. And so, Darian, let's hear a little bit about your story. Like, how drastically different is it from Ansley?
So my biological mother is a drug addict, and then my biological father, he just experienced a lot of trauma as a kid. So there was a lot of just emotional abuse growing up, and just a lot of, he just had a lot of mental health things to work through. So it just caused a lot of tension in the household. And I just saw both my parents go through a lot of different relationships just because of unhealed things. So I grew up where we went to church, but then whenever we came home, Jesus was not in that house at all. And so for me, I grew up where it was very confusing of why follow Jesus if it doesn't do anything for you. So it just led to a lot of confusion. And then, as I grew up and got into some relationships, just seeking love in the wrong places, made a lot of bad choices, just turned to guys in the world to kind of fill that need, and then moved to Georgia, got into a relationship with somebody who wasn't a believer, and then I was yearning for community. What I thought was going to bring me peace was not bringing me peace or joy. And then as I got plugged into godly community, that's when the Lord just kind of put it on my heart of, hey, I can't bless something that's not bringing me honor and glory. And choosing me will always be worth it. And choosing to trust Jesus is never a mistake. And so I left that relationship, sold the house, and I've been running after Jesus ever since.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, it's crazy how different that is, you know? But I love the fact that Jesus chases us regardless, you know? And my story, I mean, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, was raised in a single-parent household. I really never missed my dad because my family was always there. My cousins, you talk about it takes a village, that's what I witnessed when I was really young. I mean, I would even call my uncle dad. That's how my family really stepped up. But when I was young, I was always with my mom, so I was always going to church with her, but I really didn't have that personal relationship with Jesus. But when I got to Georgia, I started playing basketball, started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and started to dabble in things I wasn't supposed to be dabbling in, but I still loved basketball, and that's how I met Jesus. I would walk up after school to this church every single day just to play basketball. And the guy there who became my mentor, who became my best friend, who was the best man at my wedding, he kind of led me to Jesus by the way he lived. I went to a beach camp when I was 15, 16 years old, and I heard somebody share the gospel for the very first time, and it made sense.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling, now that I know, it was the Holy Spirit just waking me up. I walked outside and I was like, this is crazy. And I had an enlightening moment. I just felt like I woke up. And then the next day, another guy came up, he preached, and he asked, whoever wants to follow Jesus, stand up. And I stood up, and the rest is history, you know? But I do see a common thread in our story. It was just pockets of surrender where we just said, Jesus, you're Lord, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I gave my life to Jesus and I came home, I was in a relationship and I was dating a girl. And this was probably a year or two in after I've been following Jesus, that I was about to get married. So this is me, 18, 19 years old. And I thought I was going to marry this girl, that I even asked my best friend, the guy who led me to Jesus, and another friend who went to that beach camp with me and gave his life to Jesus with me. I asked him to be the best man at my wedding, or the best man at my wedding, and they said no. And I just remember that rocked me. I was like, no, what do you mean no? You can't say no when somebody asks you that question. And my buddy was like, man, you need to talk to somebody smarter than you. Marriage is so big that you should probably not just walk into this blind. You're 18, you don't have a job, you don't have anything. You need to figure that out before. Yeah. And I was so frustrated with him. And he looked at me, he says, man, just talk to somebody smarter than you. And then I went to go talk to a pastor, and he pretty much told me things I did not want to hear. And then I prayed about it, and I concluded, hey, I probably shouldn't marry this girl. And that was like the big like surrender piece that I just let go and let God. And then 6 months later, man, I'm getting interviewed to be like a youth pastor at a church. Like it was crazy, the radical change when we lay things down and then God just pushes you or propels you to grow in such a way. Man, I started reading the Gospels. I think I read half the Bible within those 6 months, and I just radically was being transformed and maturing just because of surrender. And I remember surrendering relationships and friends and habits and hobbies. And through that, God was just transforming me. Yeah. So, but it's so cool to see God work in our stories. And so I got a question. When did you finally get a grip of your story? Like, did you go through like a practice? Did somebody like encourage you to write it down? What was that thing that you said, yo, I really need to know my story because I know God is going to use it in a mighty way? Like, when was that?
I think for me, because it was shortly after I had left that relationship, it was probably like 6 months to a year after I left that relationship that I became a young adult apprentice.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think that's where for me, being in the apprenticeship, I just felt the Lord was calling me to work at the local church. And I think in that time, I was like, man, if I'm going to have a lot of people following me and if I'm going to be leading a lot of people, I got to look like Jesus. And I got to get rid of some things that are just going to prevent me from being a godly leader. And part of that was getting rid of shame from my past. I think I had to forgive myself in order to then be able to share my story with others and help them. I think that was really, it was just being around young adult women who had similar stories and me just being able to look at them and be like, hey, me too. And guess what? The Lord can still use you and wants to use you.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do think that God wants to use our stories. That's why he gives us to us. You know, like, what about you, Ansley? When do you think that you were like, man, I really need to figure it out. I need to know times and places and those small stories like, hey, I met Jesus here. I was pushing him on a swing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a very simple answer, but just growing up in church, I've always heard that you need to know what was your life like before Christ, when did you encounter Christ, and how did your life change after? Just growing up, I've always heard you need to know that story. And if you can't think of a story of when that happened for you, you need to have a moment where you're questioning, am I in a relationship with Jesus?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's so good. I remember my mentor, we actually started like a Bible study when we were, I think this was like early 20s. And he actually took us through a class to share our stories. And we did it. It was like probably like 5 or 6 weeks. And we wrote it down and we talked through it. And then we had a night where we all shared it. And he just kept emphasizing like your story is probably one of the best ways to share the gospel.
Yeah.
You know, and that actually leads me to the next question I wanted us to talk about is how have you seen you sharing your story help somebody else in their relationship with Jesus? And you kind of already hinted it, you know, like you said, you were hearing women talk about things they're going through, and then you were like, yo, I was just there 2 years ago, you know? So let's talk about that. Like, how have you seen your story encourage other people and push people to Jesus?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have just had a lot of, it's so funny because I remember I used to be so afraid to share my story, and I think that was the enemy because he knew how sharing our stories can just help people feel safe and seen. But ever since,
say that again. You said, what does it happen with the enemy?
I feel like the enemy can instill fear in us from sharing our story because God wants to use us and rewrite our stories. And when we share our stories, you're kind of, it's like encouraging and equipping each other.
Yeah, that's good.
And empowering each other. But circling back to the question about just kind of how we've seen God, I guess, can you re-ask the question?
Yeah, like how have you seen God use your story to push people towards Jesus?
I think I've just had a lot. I can't even count at this point over the past few years of just young adult women specifically coming up to me and talking about living with their significant other or dating someone who's not a believer. A lot of dating advice. And it's funny because a lot of people say my standards are too high, but it's like, that's because I settled before and I didn't keep Jesus at the center of it. And when Jesus isn't the center, it's not going to go the way you expect it to. So there's a lot of hard truth conversations I've had to have, but I've also had a lot of young adult women come back and say, hey, thank you.
Yeah. I bet.
So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've had the kind of the same results, man. When
Yeah.
I told people like I was going to get married very young, and I then said no, and I broke up, and people would come up to me and be like, "How'd you do that? And
Yeah.
why'd you do that?" And I was like, "Because of Jesus."
Yeah.
You know, like, so yeah, using your story should help people
Yeah.
do the same thing.
Well, and God's not going to leave you hanging. I mean,
Yeah,
when you
that's
are saying, God, I'm going to trust you with this, he's not going to, I mean, the Lord's going to provide. I mean, it may not look the way you think it's going to, but when you're bold for him, he's going to make a way.
Oh, for sure.
So,
Man, I love that though. Like, I think for us, if you listen and you go to our church, you know we're in an all to him journey, discipleship journey. But if you're not, we're in an all to him discipleship journey. And what we're learning is how to give God all control, not just some control, but all control. And I feel like
surrender.
that's what our stories should help people trust. You know, like trust that God is going to do what he said he's going to do, that he's going to fulfill his promises. He's going to keep his promises for us. And letting go and letting him be the Lord of your life, it's scary, but it's the best life possible.
You'll
you
never
know?
regret doing it either.
Yeah.
You will. I don't know a single person that has said, I regretted trusting Jesus. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And I love that we both surrendered our lives to Jesus a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
And then Ansley.
We should have been like Ansley. She had more wisdom
We
than
should
us.
have. We should have. But it's cool that you are on the front end of it. Like you gave your life to Jesus very early. And is that statement true? Do you regret it?
No.
Do you feel like you missed out at anything?
Not at all.
You
Not
know,
at all.
just to encourage somebody. Somebody's listening right now, and that's their story. Like they gave their life to Jesus at 5, 6, 7 years old, and they feel like they're watching the world, and sometimes the devil's saying, "Hey, you missing out."
Oh, yeah.
You know, but it's not true. So how has your story encouraged people and pushed people to Jesus?
Well, I would say the story that I just shared has encouraged people to follow Jesus, not just have your parents' faith, but you've got to get your own relationship with the Lord and follow him every single day in the daily life, taking up your cross and following him, not just showing up on Sunday. And I'm saved because of my parents are saved, or because I've been raised in church. No, when did you encounter the Lord, and how are you following him? But I would say I've also fallen short in my life, and there was a season where I found my identity in who I was dating. And so just this past week, I was meeting with a person and sharing my testimony of how I gave those things up and surrendered those things to the Lord to better follow him. And it's just beautiful seeing that person process in real time how the lesser things that they're finding their identity in are not serving them. They're leading to anxiety and despair. But just sharing how Jesus is our hope and our peace, it's beautiful to watch them process how they want to surrender and get that abundant life that I was talking about.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love the fact that when we share our stories, we are sharing hope.
Yeah.
And we are sharing peace. Like it's possible because of what Jesus has done in and through us. And I just love that. And I think sharing your story is just, again, one of the best things that we could do.
Yeah.
And so my next question is, what if somebody is super scared? Like it's just has a fear of sharing their stories because, like even you said, like there was a shame associated with it. I mean, we're talking about our sin. We're talking about maybe they're on the other end, like they don't have that crazy story.
Yeah.
They didn't go way off the rails, you know? Like how does someone overcome the fear of sharing their story? And I got a couple answers that I want to
I got
give.
some
But
hard truth for that answer.
yeah, let's go. Let's chop
Ansley,
it up.
do you want to go
Yeah.
first? Okay, go ahead.
Just realize that it's not your story.
Yeah.
It is the Lord's.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people, I was not saved at 6 years old. I was saved 2,000 years ago when Jesus died on the cross and did for me what I could not do for myself. And so it's not about Ansley. It's about God. So
Yeah, no, that's good. What you got? You got some hard truth you said?
Yeah, so buckle in.
Buckle in.
No,
There's no seatbelts.
I agree 100% with what Ansley's saying. And I also think underneath that fear, at the end of the day, you're making it about you from not sharing your story.
Yeah.
Because you're worried about what other people are going to think, which is a pride thing. So I think I would just encourage people, first, what's your why for not sharing? And 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be about you being worried about what other people are going to think of you.
Yeah.
And two, I would encourage people, don't put God in a box. I think sometimes when people, for example, we'll talk about Ansley's story of just how, people may be like, oh, well, I grew up and had like this beautiful Christian household, and, I was blessed and protected to not, go down this crazy path that led to a whole bunch of shame. But God can still use that, so don't put him in a box.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I would encourage too. But yeah, I think we got to be humble and stop living in fear, because that's where the enemy wants you to be.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's good. I mean, I was going to say it's not about you.
Yeah.
And the fact that your story is so unique, that God has written a beautiful story in your life that he wants you to share, because when we share our stories, we're really just talking about him.
Yeah.
Now, that did bring up a thought. Should people share every detail of their story? Absolutely not. Just to encourage somebody. People don't need to know everything. They don't need to know the detail, like the fine print of your life.
Well,
sometimes
people can start to glamorize the sin that they lived in.
Yeah.
So when somebody shares their testimony and they talk about the life before Jesus for 30 minutes, and then they give, and then I put my faith in Jesus and here we are today. Like, you can't glamorize the sin.
Yeah. Well, and people are human too. Especially, this I feel like can especially kind of apply to people that work at the church, is just as followers of Jesus, we all have a duty to just lead people and be disciple makers and things like that. But not everyone is a safe zone, and not everyone can handle what you've been through with care. So just use wisdom with what you share. I think everyone's at a different level in their faith journey and just emotional maturity levels. And so just be super wise with how much you share. And I think there's wisdom in what you said too, like don't glamorize the sin, because then what's the scripture where it says, whoever looks back, I cannot use. Whoever looks back and
pan on the plow and but looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God.
So when you were like glamorizing your faith versus rejoicing and look how the Lord redeemed me and rewrote my story and look at where I am now. If you're focused more on looking back and glamorizing your sin, I would agree that you probably need to pause.
Yeah. No, I actually have a principle that I kind of tell people when they ask me, hey, what should I talk about in my story? I was like, hey, you should talk about your past. Mm-hmm. But then every time you talk about the past, you should talk about how you've been transformed from it. Yeah. Right? And
that's good.
I shared a story about my dad on the podcast with, the one that we do with James and at the church, so on The Pursuit. And what I shared was, my story started with a single parent household, and that's how it is. My dad left when I was really young. Obviously, that had a lot of resentment with my family and whatnot. But I remember when I became a Christian, learning what love is and learning that I've been forgiven much. And then I remember reading in 1 John 4, it says, how can you love a God you can't see if you cannot love a people you can see? And so I share that story about my dad. Like, there was a point in my life that I didn't care if I had a relationship with him or not. Yeah. But then I remember reading that in 2015. And it just transforming my heart, saying that I need to be intentional with my dad. That Jesus Christ in heaven put on flesh and came down to earth, right? And what he decided to do was that he was intentional with us. He came to forgive us, and that's what I needed to do with my dad. So I remember buying a plane ticket, going to say hi to my dad, and it's letting him know that I loved him and that I forgave him, and we hung out. And I remember I went for Thanksgiving, and that was the first Thanksgiving I ever had with my dad. I was like 20. I mean, I don't know, what was 2015, 2016? That was like almost close to 10 years ago. Yeah. So I was like 23, 24 years old, and I'm not going to lie, it was just such a surreal moment that I was sitting down at the dinner table with my dad. And I remember wanting that so bad.
Yeah.
That, I remember, man, just that's what I was praying for. I remember asking God to bring him for Christmas and to do all these things. And here he was transforming my heart. And it wasn't him coming to me, it was me going to him. Yeah. And I think sharing the transformation that God does in your life really does change you, and it helps other people take those steps that they need to do, steps of forgiveness and both steps of faith and of surrender. And that's why I think us sharing our stories, not just our past, but the peace that God has given us, the steps that we have taken with him. And the crazy thing is like you said earlier, he's not going to leave you. And I got to reconcile with my dad, And I'm not gonna lie, on Father's Day, like I was sad that he wasn't here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And that's because of the work that God did in me. Like, to be honest, I didn't remember any of this stuff when I was a kid. I was just like, man, I was kind of sad that he didn't get to meet my baby girl. You know, that he didn't get to meet his granddaughter. And so I just think sharing the stories of transformation, how God has really wrecked you, but in the best ways, and then transformed you to be an ambassador of him. I just think that's cool.
Yeah, he shouldn't do a work in our lives and us just hold it here.
Yeah.
We need to share it with others because it's going to help them realize the kind of forgiveness they need to extend to their dad.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you got it. So I just think it's cool. I think people need to overcome the fear, and it's not about you, and then pray about it.
Yeah.
And then maybe share your testimony with your good friends.
Yes.
If you're not in a small group, maybe that should be a good start. Like practice sharing your testimonies with one another.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the elevator pitch? Like try to share your testimony in 30 seconds, in 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You ever write it down like that?
Yeah. Well, our friends, we have a friend who was going on the Scotland mission trip. And for the Scotland mission trip, they gave her a word count. I probably already shared this on this podcast, but they gave her a word count. Hey, we need you to write your testimony in this format, make it this long. And so she said, hey, I want to write this. Can I get some help? So a few of us made it a thing. Everybody came over, and with the word count, with the parameters that they gave her, we all did the same thing. And after we all wrote our stories, we read them out loud. And it was one of the most beautiful nights that I've had with that friend group.
I bet.
So do that with your friends.
Yeah. That sounds like a good night to me.
Yeah, invite me over.
Hey,
I want to hear your
let's
story.
Just hear your story. Let's see what God has been doing and is doing.
It's beautiful.
And it's okay also if God is still writing your story.
Amen.
Some of you guys are just in the middle of your testimony.
That's right.
Well, does he ever stop writing our story?
No. But
You
I'm
know?
talking about like that, those big parts, like
Yeah.
those big things that when you were
really jacked up.
Yeah, So some people's like, man, I just don't know if I can share it yet, but you can share parts of it,
Yeah.
So
You can still celebrate how God is actively like working and tugging on your heart to draw nearer to him.
yeah. All right. So last thing we're going to talk about is if somebody does want to share their story and they don't know how to start. I know we do something here at Crosspoint when we ask people to do videos and whatnot. So how could we give them an easy template, simple way to just share their story?
That's good.
I have some questions that you've previously given me
Yeah, what are
that
they?
I can share.
Yeah, share them.
Okay. A couple of the questions you gave was, what was your life before Christ?
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet Jesus?
Yeah.
What is life like with Jesus? So just those things.
I mean, that's pretty much, those are my simple things. So what was life like before? Mm-hmm. How'd you meet him? And then what is life like now, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. You want to add anything to that, Ainsley?
I have nothing to add to that. You're the one that took the class. What did you learn from the class?
It was that. It was finding ways how you can, so they wanted you to write your story. So it was kind of those questions. I think there were two more just to elaborate a little bit more because it's like home life, like what was your life when you were little, and then this, and then how did you see God's thread through your life, and then the practical things that you did, like just this is what I did that really changed my life. Like I surrendered this relationship, I surrendered this habit, I confessed about this, like I was honest, but it's all wrapped up in that. Just be honest in those three questions. What was life like before Jesus? And now we already said you don't have to get into the fine print. You don't need to share all the details unless you're in a very safe place.
Yeah.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So we need to be just discerning when we share everything.
That's right.
But you can always share something, right? And so what was life like before Jesus? And then how'd you meet him? Like just be like that moment you should like recall. I am married. So on my wedding day, I can recall the day. Like I can recall the first time I saw Kara in her wedding dress and our dance and the food and the people. Like when you met Jesus, that's the type of memory that you should try to have. Yeah. Like what was it like? Like what did you hear? Who shared the gospel with you? Where were you? What time was it? How old were you? Like those are the times. When'd you meet him? And now what is your life like with him now? Oh, I talk to him in the morning. I pray. I read the Bible. I do this. I go to church. I'm in small group. Man, I broke all these chains that I had. Like, what is life like with him now? And then share that. Because you always want to leave somebody with hope.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you don't need to share everything. Maybe you just need to share the things that connect with that person.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that's good. So you guys feel good?
I think so.
All right. Anything else before we go?
I don't think so.
All
That
right.
was good.
Yeah. So hey, we
Share
hope
your
you
story.
guys, we hope you guys share your story. We hope this encouraged you to share your story. We also, if you would like to be part of one of our video testimonies here at Crosspoint City, you can find the link in our website to actually write your story and share it, and then potentially be one of the people who share it on a Sunday. So that's just something that you can find out through the app or on our website. But with that being said, hey, we love you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.